Hello, welcome to Phantom Homicide. Today we are delving into the case of the Keddie murders.
Right. And this one, it's truly one of California's most brutal, really perplexing unsolved homicides. We're talking about a quadruple slaying back in April '81 in this tiny remote resort community called Keddie up in the Sierra Nevadas.
Yeah, and looking at the materials for this deep dive, the violence in Cabin 28
Yeah.
is just overwhelming. But what really grabs you, what makes it so haunting, and what we're really going to unpack today is how badly the initial investigation was handled.
Oh, absolutely catastrophic failures that basically let the people responsible just walk away for decades.
Exactly. So our plan is to really dig into the chaos of that night, piece together the timeline as best we can, look closely at that gruesome crime scene, and then track the really critical new evidence that came out much, much later.
Yeah, things like the hammer they found, that chilling letter, the DNA breakthroughs, stuff that only surfaced, well into the 2000s. If you're interested in true crime, forensics, especially investigative screw-ups, Keddie is like the ultimate cautionary tale.
It really is. We'll show you exactly why this case still feels so unresolved.
So let's start with the victims, the family who moved there, sort of seeking peace, right?
Right. There was Glenna, Susan Sue Sharp. She was 36. Her son, John Stephen Sharp, just 15.
Yeah.
John's friend, Dana Hall Wingate, who was 17. And Sue's daughter, Tina Louise Sharp, only 12.
And it's crucial to remember Tina wasn't found with the others. She was initially missing, which just added another layer of confusion and horror right from the start.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Keddie Resort, early 80s. What was it like?
It's quiet,
Yeah.
very small, pretty isolated, surrounded by mountains up there. Sue Sharp, she was a single mom, and she was really looking for a fresh start, some stability for her kids.
She'd separated from her husband, James Sharp, back in '79, left Connecticut, moved out to Northern California to be closer to her brother, I think.
That's right. They lived in a trailer near Quincy first, but then in the fall of 1980, they moved into cabin #28 at the Keddie Resort.
In Cabin 28, it wasn't exactly spacious, was it? A modest two-bedroom place?
No, definitely not. Sue was there with her 5 kids, John, Sheila, Tina, and then the 2 little ones, Rick, who was 10, and Greg, just 5 years old. So 6 people plus any visitors in a small cabin.
It's also kind of interesting. One source mentioned the cabin had actually just been vacated by the Plumas County Sheriff himself, Sylvester Douglas Thomas, right before the Sharps moved in.
Yeah, it really underscores just how small and, I guess, interconnected that little resort community was.
Okay, so let's walk through the timeline for that day, Saturday, April 11th, 1981. It seems like a normal day at first.
Pretty much. In the morning, Sue, Sheila, and Greg drove from some friend's place, the Meeks, to pick up Rick. On the way back, maybe around midday, they saw John and his friend Dana Wingate hitchhiking.
And they picked them up.
Yeah, gave him a ride the 6 miles or so back to Keddie, back to cabin 28.
But the teenagers didn't stick around long.
No, John and Dana, by about 3:30 that afternoon, they'd hitchhiked back into Quincy again. Apparently wanted to visit some friends. They were definitely seen downtown.
Which means they had to get back to Keddie again later that evening. And the evidence strongly suggests they were back in Cabin 28 when everything happened.
Right, but the exact time they returned, that's one of the first big unknowns. It really complicates nailing down the precise sequence of events that night.
As the evening went on, things shifted a bit in the cabin. Sheila, she was 14, she left Cabin 28 sometime after 8:00 p.m.
Right, she went next door to cabin #27 for a sleepover with the Siebold family, a decision that, clearly saved her life.
Then a bit later, around 9:30 p.m., Tina, the 12-year-old, she came back to Cabin 28. She'd been watching TV at the Siebold's.
Yeah, apparently she checked the time at the Siebold's place right before she headed back to her own cabin. And that's the last time anyone outside the family reliably saw Tina alive.
So as night properly fell, who was definitely inside Cabin 28?
Okay, so we have Sue Sharp, the 2 younger boys, Rick and Greg, their friend, Justin Smart, who was 12 and staying the night. And we have to assume John and Dana were back from Quincy by then.
So the cabin was full, and just feet away from the Seavolts in Cabin 27.
Exactly. And this is where we hit that first really major baffling point of the case. The silence.
It's almost unbelievable. These cabins were practically on top of each other, flimsy construction probably. Yet the Seabolts, right next door, claimed they heard nothing. Absolutely nothing of the horrific attack unfolding just yards away.
It makes no sense, right? We're talking about a struggle involving multiple victims, bindings, knives, hammers. It had to be violent, prolonged, yet total silence reported next door.
It raises so many questions. Was it incredibly fast? Were the attackers somehow experts at keeping quiet? Or did they use something else, maybe, to subdue everyone quickly, like drugs or chloroform?
Well, we know the silence wasn't absolute, because there was that couple in cabin #16.
Right, 2 cabins down. They reported being woken up around 1:45 a.m.
Yeah, by what they described as muffled screaming. They looked out, couldn't see anything specific, couldn't pinpoint it, and, well, they went back to sleep, tragically.
So that 1:45 a.m. muffled scream, that's our best guess for maybe when the attack was actively happening, or at least starting.
It seems like the most solid time marker we have. But if muffled screams woke people 2 cabins away, how on earth did the 3 young boys, Rick, Greg, and Justin, sleep through it all in the very next room?
That's the question. Just a thin wall separating them from that.
Were they drugged? Did the killers know they were there and deliberately avoid waking them? Maybe suggesting they knew the kids, knew the layout? That mystery, the survival of those boys, is just central to understanding Keddie.
So the horror inside cabin 28 went undiscovered until the next morning, Sunday, April 12th, around 10:00 a.m.
That's when Sheila Sharp came back from her sleepover next door at the Seabolts. She walked up to her cabin, cabin 28, and immediately knew something was wrong. She mentioned, like, an awful smell, maybe blood, and things looked disturbed through the window.
So she went inside.
She opened the door and saw, well, the unthinkable in the living room. She immediately turned around, ran back to cabin 27 to get help.
And this is where the investigation starts to go wrong, almost immediately.
Instantly. Jamie Seabolt from next door, hearing what Sheila found, went over to cabin 28. Now, understandably, his first instinct was the kids. He managed to get the 3 surviving boys, Rick, Greg, and Justin, out through their bedroom window.
Okay, saving the kids, that makes sense in a panic.
It does, but then Jamie also admitted he went inside the cabin briefly through the back door, just to check if anyone was alive.
Oh no, so right there, the crime scene is compromised.
Completely. Think about it. Potential footprints, DNA transfer, fibers, maybe even partial prints, all possibly disturbed or destroyed before any trained forensic team even got called, let alone arrived. Given how complex and brutal this scene was, that contamination right at the start was just terrible.
Let's talk about the scene itself. The level of violence tells a story, doesn't it? About rage, maybe personalization.
Absolutely. All 3 victims found dead in the living room, Sue, John, and Dana, they were all bound.
And the bindings were specific, weren't they? Not just random rope.
Very specific. They used electrical cords and appliance wires seemingly ripped right from things in the cabin. And they used medical tape. The reports are clear. This medical tape didn't belong to the Sharps. The killers brought it with them.
Which suggests planning, premeditation, not just a spontaneous explosion.
It certainly points that way. And the weapons found, it paints a picture of chaotic but also maybe focused rage. They found 2 bloodied knives. One was a standard kitchen knife, likely from the Sharps' own kitchen, but it was severely bent.
Bent from the force.
Yeah, bent way out of shape. They also found a hammer and a pellet gun, or at least pellets. The blood evidence showed the main struggle, the violence, was concentrated in that living room area.
Okay, let's break down the victims. Sue Sharp.
Sue was found under a yellow blanket. She was nude from the waist down. She'd been gagged really tightly with a blue bandana in her own underwear, and that was secured with the medical tape they brought.
Horrific. And her injuries.
Multiple stab wounds to her chest, but the fatal injury was a huge cut across her throat, horizontally, so deep it actually nicked her spine and larynx. And there was something else, a distinct imprint on the side of her head.
What kind of imprint?
It matched the butt of a Daisy 880 Powerline BB pellet rifle, suggesting she was also struck with that.
Okay, and John Sharp, her son.
John, 15 years old, his throat was also slashed, and he suffered severe blunt force trauma consistent with hammer blows.
And Dana Wingate, John's friend.
Dana, the 17-year-old, he also had multiple head injuries. But the reports stressed that the forensic analysis indicated these injuries were likely caused by a different hammer than the one used on Sue and John.
2 different hammers.
That's what the evidence suggested. But Dana's actual cause of death officially was manual strangulation, asphyxiation.
So we have stabbing, blunt force from potentially 2 different hammers, strangulation, it sounds like either total frenzy or maybe more than one attacker?
That's exactly the debate. Does the variation point to one person losing control completely using whatever was at hand, or does it strongly suggest multiple perpetrators, maybe each with a preferred method or weapon? The autopsy findings confirmed those varied causes of death. It was a prolonged, incredibly violent assault.
Which brings us right back to those 3 little boys, Rick, Greg, and Justin, found unharmed. in the next room.
Just a wall away, physically untouched, apparently sleeping through all of that. The sheer level of personalized rage and violence we just described happening feet away, and they're okay.
This doesn't track easily. If the goal was eliminating witnesses, why leave 3?
The theories pull in different directions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it calculated? Did the killers, maybe knowing the boys, particularly Justin, who we'll get to, his stepdad is key, did they consciously choose not to harm them? Maybe couldn't bring themselves to.
Or was it just practical? Maybe the struggle in the living room took so much out of them they were exhausted. Or maybe they heard something, feared discovery, and just fled before they, finished the job in the bedroom.
And complicating that is the mention of blood drops found on Tina's bed, which was near the boys' room. That suggests maybe she was targeted or attacked near them before she was taken. So the bedroom wasn't necessarily just ignored.
Whatever the reason, sparing those boys. It feels like the biggest clue suggesting the killers weren't random strangers, that they knew this family, knew this cabin.
So while the investigators are trying to process this absolute carnage in the living room, they make another huge error, a really catastrophic oversight.
What was that?
They didn't realize Tina Sharp, the 12-year-old daughter, was missing. For hours, she was just unaccounted for, not immediately treated as a victim or an abduction case.
Hours. But surely someone noticed she wasn't there.
Justin Eason, the friend who survived, the one who was staying over, the reports say he actually tried to tell the first officers who arrived. He said Tina was gone. But somehow, tragically, his warning just got lost in the chaos. Ignored for hours.
That's unbelievable. So when did they finally realize?
Much later in the day. Only then did it register. The murdered woman's young daughter wasn't there.
So how did they handle it then? Treat it as a kidnapping?
Initially, yeah. The thinking shifted to abduction, maybe with a sexual motive. The FBI even got involved, which makes sense. Missing child linked to a triple homicide.
Okay, so federal resources, that's good.
You'd think so. But then, in another decision that just seems baffling in hindsight, the FBI pulled out. After April 29th, they basically said the California State Department of Justice, the DOJ, was doing an adequate job.
Adequate. After seeing that crime scene, the contamination, knowing a child was still missing, they thought the local effort was adequate and just.
Yeah.
Left?
That decision, cutting off federal resources and expertise so early, given all the mistakes that followed, it looks absolutely indefensible now. It set the whole investigation back enormously.
It really did. And speaking of just unforgivable errors, the composite sketches.
Oh, the sketches, yeah. They had an eyewitness, right? Justin Eason. A terrified 12-year-old, sure, but an eyewitness.
So they brought in top FBI or DOJ forensic artists.
No. Plumas County made the absolutely stunning decision to use, wait for it, an untrained volunteer, a guy named Harlan Embry.
A volunteer, not a professional police sketch artist, to draw the faces described by the only witness who was interviewed under hypnosis.
Exactly. It's genuinely mind-boggling. This is maybe the single most crucial piece of descriptive evidence they had, and they handed off to an amateur. The sketches that went out to the public describing two men, late 20s, early 30s, one tall, dark blonde hair, the other shorter, black, greasy hair, both wearing gold-framed sunglasses.
Those descriptions were based on a process that was flawed from the absolute start.
Totally unreliable. It likely poisoned the well for any useful public tips right from the get-go.
And there were other leads, weren't there? Like neighbor reports.
Yeah, conflicting ones. Some people, including members of the Seabolt family next door, remembered seeing a dark green van parked near Cabin 28 around 9:00 p.m. that night.
9:00 p.m. That's much earlier than the 1:15 a.m. screaming.
Right. It opens up the possibility that the killers arrived much earlier, maybe ambushed the family or incapacitated them somehow before the main attack. It muddies the timeline even further.
And amidst all this confusion, what was the official line from the sheriff, Doug Thomas?
Well, Sheriff Thomas moved pretty quickly to shut down some of the early rumors. Things about, like, ritualistic crime or it being drug-related. He was very clear. No illegal drugs, no paraphernalia found in the cabin.
Okay, ruling out rumors is standard procedure, I guess.
It is, but maybe dismissing those angles so quickly, so publicly, might have inadvertently narrowed the focus too soon, especially when the direction they did focus on was, as we're about to see, handled just as badly.
So, the takeaway from this initial phase, it's just a pattern of screw-ups, really. Scene contamination, not realizing Tina was gone, using an amateur for the sketch.
Yeah, a cascade of errors, probably driven by limited resources in a small town, sure, but also just really poor judgment calls. It basically guaranteed that any chance for quick justice was lost within the first day or two.
Okay, so this leads us directly to the people who've been the main focus for, well, for decades now. Martin Smart and John Bobed.
Right. And their connection to the scene is immediate and crucial. Martin Smart was the stepfather of Justin Eason, the boy who survived, the one staying over in the boys' bedroom.
And Smart lived right there in the resort.
Cabin #26, practically next door to the Sharps, and #28. And John Bobed. He was Smart's friend who was just staying with Smart and his wife Marilyn temporarily.
Where do they know each other from?
They'd met at a VA hospital. Apparently both were getting treatment for PTSD, which, right away suggests potentially volatile personalities that investigators should have looked at very, very carefully.
And Smart was on the radar early, wasn't he? Something about a missing tool.
Yeah, he became a person of interest pretty quickly, partly because he himself reported that his claw hammer was missing, gone from his place right around the time of the murders.
But the real issue, the absolute scandal here, is how the California DOJ investigators handled the interviews with Smart and Bobes, guys named Bradley and Krim.
Harry Bradley and P.A. Krim. And yeah, the records show just a shocking level of incompetence. They basically let these two prime suspects lie their way out of suspicion.
How so? What did they miss?
Okay, let's just take John Bobed first. During his official interview, he makes this grand claim. He says he's an 18-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department, retired after being shot in the line of duty.
18 years on the force. That's specific. And easily checkable, right?
Totally checkable. The source notes point out that if Bradley and Krim had just looked at Bobed's date of birth, they'd have seen instantly it was impossible. He couldn't have served 18 years. It was a complete fabrication, likely designed to, project authority or gain credibility.
A blatant lie that should have set off major alarm bells.
Huge red flags. And it wasn't just that. He lied about how long he'd even been living in Keddie. Keddie claimed he'd been there 2 weeks longer than he actually had. And then, weirdly, he falsely claimed that Marilyn Smart, Martin's wife, was his niece.
His niece? Why make that up?
Who knows? But it's not a minor slip-up. It shows a pattern, right? Intentional deception, trying to muddy the waters about his connections and background.
Okay, what about their alibi for the night of the murders?
This is where it gets even messier. Smart, his wife Marilyn, and Bobed all said they went out to the local bar, the Backdoor Bar. Smart sometimes worked there. They claim that before they went out, they stopped by Cabin 28.
To see Sue Sharp.
Yeah, supposedly to invite Sue out for a drink with them, which they said she declined.
Okay, so they admit being at her door earlier that night.
Right, but then, later in his own interview, Bobed completely contradicted that. He flat out denied ever having met Sue Sharp at all.
Wait, he denied meeting her, but Marilyn and Martin said they all went to her cabin together. That's a direct contradiction on a massive point.
Exactly. How do investigators just let that slide? It's a fundamental lie about contact with the victim just hours before she was murdered. It demands aggressive follow-up.
And their timeline for coming home from the bar, was that solid?
Not at all. Bobed claimed that Marilyn was awake when he and Martin got back after their second trip out. But Marilyn told investigators, no, she was asleep.
Awake versus asleep, another major discrepancy.
Huge.
Yep.
And again, the DOJ guys apparently didn't push them on it. They let them get away with this loose, unverified story about where they were during those critical early morning hours, like 1:0 a.m. to 4:0 a.m.
But the worst oversight, the most chilling one, involved Martin Smart himself, right? Something he said.
Yeah. During his interview, Smart's talking about his stepson, Justin, the boy who survived. And he makes this comment, almost casually, saying Justin might have seen something. But then he adds this phrase, without me detecting him.
Without me detecting him.
Wow. Think about what that implies. It suggests Smart himself was present doing something that he didn't want his stepson to see or hear. It strongly hints at his own involvement, or at the very least his presence during the crime.
And the investigators just missed it, or ignored it.
Apparently so. Later on, when these interview notes surfaced, the Plumas County authorities who reopened the case were reportedly furious. They basically accused Bradley and Krim of inexcusably sloppy work.
But by then, the damage was done.
Irreparable damage. Because the DOJ officially cleared Smart and Bobed based on these flawed interviews, the pressure was off. Bobed went back to Chicago, apparently got caught later running scams on police officers, ironically, and died in 1988. Smart moved to Reno, Nevada, and lived until 2000.
So the colossal failures of just two investigators allowed the prime suspects to walk free.
Wow.
Permanently.
That's the tragic reality of it. The window for justice slammed shut right there in that interview room.
So for 3 long years after the murders, Tina Sharp was still just Missing.
Yeah.
That must have been absolute agony for the family.
Unimaginable. But then, exactly 3 years to the day after the murders, April 11th, 1984, there was a grim discovery.
What happened?
A bottle collector, someone just out scavenging, was working near Feather Falls in Butte County at a place called Camp 18.
And Butte County. That's nowhere near Keddie, is it?
Now, it's about 62 miles away, really quite distant over the county line. And this bottle collector found part of a human skull, specifically the cranium and a piece of the jawbone, the mandible.
And they identified it.
Yeah. By June of 1984, forensic analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Tina Sharp. So the family finally knew her fate wasn't abduction, it was murder. But even this discovery, it was marred by yet another investigative fumble.
What happened this time?
Shortly after the remains were found and announced, the Butte County Sheriff's Office got an anonymous phone call. Someone called in specifically identifying the skull as Tina's.
An anonymous tip, identifying the victim.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds potentially huge. Did they trace the call? Get any info?
That's the unbelievable part. That call, which could have held clues about who knew, how they knew, maybe even about the disposal, it wasn't handled properly at all. The sources reveal that a tape recording of that call was found years later.
Years? Where?
After 2013, apparently. Just sitting at the bottom of an evidence box. It had been basically ignored or lost for decades. And then to make it even worse, that original tape and even a backup copy they supposedly made eventually just vanished completely.
The recording is gone. The actual voice of the anonymous caller.
Gone. Wiped out. Destroyed what might have been a direct link, however small, to understanding how Tina's remains ended up 62 miles away. Just another layer of failure.
So the case basically went cold again after Tina was found.
Pretty much stagnated for almost 2 decades. Until Martin Smart died in 2000. After his death, suddenly, information that had been ignored or maybe suppressed started coming out. And it painted a very clear picture of Smart's guilt.
Like what? What came out?
One of the biggest things was from Smart's own counselor. This counselor came forward and alleged that Smart had actually confessed to him. Confessed to killing Sue Sharp and Tina Sharp.
He confessed. Did he give a motive?
Yes. According to the counselor, Smart said the motive was deeply personal. He claimed Sue was actively trying to convince his wife, Marilyn, to leave him, and he admitted he killed Tina specifically because, in his words, she witnessed the whole thing.
Wow, so Tina saw the attack on Sue, John, and Dana.
That's what Smart apparently claimed. And chillingly, Smart also apparently boasted to this counselor that he knew how to beat a polygraph test.
Which explains why the DOJ cleared him back in '81. He passed, or seemed to pass, the polygraph.
Exactly. He was confident he could lie his way through it, and tragically, it seems he did. On top of that, his wife, Marilyn Smart, eventually admitted something critical too. She said she saw Martin burning something in their fireplace the morning right after the murders.
Burning evidence.
Sounds very much like it. But the real smoking gun, the thing that just highlights how badly the first investigation missed the obvious, was a letter.
A letter Smart wrote.
Yeah. After he left Keddie and moved to Reno, he wrote a letter to Marilyn. They were having marital problems, clearly. And in this letter, discussing their issues, he wrote this absolutely explosive line. Quote, "I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives."
4 people's lives. Not 1, not 2, 4.
Unambiguous, directly linking himself to the entire quadruple homicide. And this letter, it was apparently just overlooked back in 1981. How you overlook something like that in a murder investigation involving the writer is, well, it's another profound failure. It let him live free for another 20 years.
But eventually, the case did get reopened properly.
Thankfully, yes. Plumas County got a new sheriff, Greg Hagwood, and a dedicated special investigator, Mike Gamberg. They really pushed hard in the 2010s, going back over everything, especially the physical evidence.
And they found things.
They did. In March 2016, they found that missing hammer, or at least a hammer matching the description of Smart's missing one. It was recovered from a local pond.
In a pond.
Hidden. Sheriff Hagwood, who actually grew up nearby and was 16 when the murders happened, so he had a personal connection. He emphasized that. He said its location meant it was intentionally put there, deliberately concealed, linking Smart, the suspect, to one of the murder weapons.
Okay, the hammer's huge. What else?
Then came the forensic breakthrough. April 2018, investigator Gamberg announced they'd finally gotten a DNA match from that medical tape used at the scene, the tape the killers brought with them.
DNA from the tape. Whose DNA?
They matched it to a known, living suspect. Now, the sources still indicate the primary focus remains Smart and Boubiet as the main actors, but getting that DNA hit decades later, It provides that concrete forensic link that was missing for so long.
So the reinvestigation basically confirmed what seemed obvious but was ignored back in '81.
Pretty much. That the killers were likely neighbors, known to the family, and the initial investigation didn't just fail, it actively seemed to miss or dismiss the evidence pointing right at them.
So by 2018, with the confession, the letter, the hammer, the DNA, Sheriff Hagwood felt confident saying who he believed was responsible.
Yeah, he publicly stated he considers Martin Smart and John Boubeid the perpetrators of the Keddie murders. They had motive, opportunity, the physical evidence, the confessions, the suspicious actions. It all pointed to them.
But there's a but, isn't there?
There is. The cruel twist is, because both Smart and Boubeid are dead Boubeid since '88, Smart since 2000, you can't actually file charges. The legal system can't prosecute the deceased.
So the case is technically still open, unsolved.
Officially, yes. It remains open because there can be no trial, no conviction. It denies the Sharp family that final legal judicial closure, even though law enforcement is certain who did it.
It's just a profound tragedy layered on top of the original one.
Yeah.
The legacy of Keddie really is about that initial failure, isn't it?
Absolutely. Even though they eventually figured it out, found the evidence, the mistakes made in those first days and weeks of 1981 meant that true justice in the form of a conviction became impossible.
And even knowing who likely did it, there are still things about that night that just nag at you, questions that don't have easy answers.
Definitely. The motive, for instance. Was it just about Sue trying to get Marilyn to leave Smart? Was it pure rage that exploded? Or did something else happen? Did it start as one thing and spiral into a quadruple murder and a panicked, botched cover-up involving Tina?
And back to the boys. Rick, Greg, and Justin. If it was Smart and Boubeid, why spare them? Does it really just come down to Smart not being able psychologically to harm his own stepson?
It's the most compelling theory for their survival. That intimate connection, that maybe even in that state of violence there was a line he wouldn't cross with Justin, or maybe they just ran out of time, got spooked, and fled after the main assault. We'll likely never know for sure.
And Tina, her disposal. Why take her body 62 miles away? If she was killed just because she witnessed it, as Smart supposedly confessed, why go to all that trouble?
Was it a calculated move to make it look like a random abduction from the cabin initially, to throw investigators off? Or was she kept alive for some period, maybe assaulted, then killed later? The fact that only parts of her skull were found means the forensic evidence couldn't tell the full story of what happened to her after she was taken. That part remains horrifyingly ambiguous.
The whole case just feels like a lesson in how not to investigate a homicide.
Gamberg, the investigator who worked so hard on reopening it, basically said as much. Something like, you could take someone just coming out of the academy and they'd have done a better job. The lost hammer, the overlooked letter, the delayed DNA testing, that vanished phone call recording. It's like a checklist of investigative malpractice.
And Kevin #28 itself, the physical place.
Yeah.
It's gone now, right?
Yeah, they finally demolished it in 2004, erased the physical site of the crime. But for the surviving Sharp family members, the trauma, compounded by never getting that day in court, it obviously lasts forever. That night just defines so much for them.
So to wrap up, we have the likely killers identified, a mountain of circumstantial, and some forensic evidence pointing to Smart and Boubeid, but no legal conclusion possible.
Right. And the final thought I'd leave you with, thinking about this case, it comes back to that lost recording, that anonymous call identifying Tina's remains. It was found decades late, only to vanish again. It makes you wonder, how often is justice lost, not because the killer didn't leave clues, but because the system itself fails? Because of incompetence, bad record keeping, the failure to see what's right in front of you until it's way too late, until the people involved are long gone. That, for me, is one of the most haunting legacies of Keddie.
Okay, so we hope you liked our today's discussion. For more such discussions, subscribe to our channel, Phantom Homicide.